Welcome back to the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone interview series, where we engage thought leaders about the challenges they have in stepping outside their comfort zones in their lives and any advice that they might have for the rest of us. Today we have a very special guest, Jenny Blake, the author of Pivot, The Only Move That Matters is the Next One. Jenny is a keynote speaker, a career and business strategist. She's had a really interesting career, and you can check out more about her and her work at pivotmethod.com. So welcome, Jenny. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. I want to talk about comfort zones. So I'd love you to think for a moment, if you could, about a time at work or in your career where you've had to operate outside your personal comfort zone. And if you could, I'd love to even hear about a situation where you feel that you've kind of overcome the challenges, and maybe another one where you haven't. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's such a great question because, Pivot is all about change. And I feel like for me, I often resisted change, or I didn't feel very resilient to change or well equipped for it. And yet it's the only constant in our lives. So while I was working on the book, I adopted the motto, if change is the only constant, then let's get better at it. And I think the same could be said, because change is equivalent to getting out of our comfort zone. When we're static, we can get comfortable because we can understand our environment and we want to control and plan and predict things. And then stretching outside of our comfort zone is when things can be a little more chaotic. And so for me, one thing that really, really stretched me was I worked at Google for 5.5 years. And when my first book, Life After College, came out, I made the decision not to go back after I took 3 months of unpaid sabbatical. And I did not think that I was cut out for entrepreneurship at all, to be self-employed. I remember feeling like I've always been good at following directions. I got good performance reviews. I was a straight A student in high school and college. I was just a good team player. Even in high school, I never got MVP on the softball team. It was always coach's award, like just the favorite player. It didn't mean I was that good. It just meant that, okay, I chipped in and had a great attitude. But what was that going to do when I was trying to support myself full time? And yet still something in my gut said I would forever regret not trying if I didn't at least give myself 6 months to see if I could get my business off the ground. And so the real stretch was not even so much on the exact nuts and bolts financially, but stretching my mindset to believe that even if I wasn't yet sure this was possible, that I could structure my days and figure out how to earn a living, to give myself the chance, as opposed to shooting it down from the outset. So in those first months after leaving Google, I remember being surprised at how much I actually enjoyed it, and how much I really relished the freedom of being able to choose the projects that I worked on in my schedule. And at Google, I had every quarter, we have OKRs, objectives and key results. And I remember having Google Docs with pages and pages of OKRs, and I could never quite keep up. And when I left, there was only one OKR, and that was pay the rent. Like, earn enough money to support myself. And it was one goal. And I actually really liked the focus. And I remember another big challenge. I remember one or both of my parents saying, well, how are you going to meet people? You're going to be so isolated on your own. Google's so many, thousands of young, smart, interesting people. And won't you miss the social elements? And there again, I was surprised that after leaving, I've made so many friends through the internet, like you, Andy, and our friend Dory, who we mentioned. And it's just been, I've met many, many more people along this journey than I originally thought possible. So what that taught me is that it's very likely that when I think a certain way, and especially about myself and what I'm capable of, that it's not set in stone, to be willing to change, to be willing to open my mind, that I can at least try. It doesn't mean we're guaranteed success at anything that we set our minds to. It's certainly been a roller coaster of 6 years for me since I quit, and of entrepreneurship. But there's not a moment that I look back and ever regret my choice to leave, even when I've been in the toughest of times since.
That's a really interesting story. I think inspirational probably for a lot of people listening. Can we just for a sec zoom in on the point in your life when you decided to write the book, as I understand it, and you took a 3 month unpaid leave, and then you decided not to come back? Were and you said you wanted to try your hand at doing something entrepreneurial because you'd regret not having ever kind of tried it. But it also sounds like there were a lot of concerns and worries there, right? Would you be able to meet people? Would you be able to pay the well? I guess number one, would you be able to pay the rent? Number two, would
Yeah.
you be able to meet people, and so on and so forth. Can you zero in on some of the other sort of like what was happening in your mind at that time? I imagine were you kind of thinking of a bunch of different possibilities? Were you set on this particular one? Did you go back and forth? Was there any angst there? Or just bring us into your mindset, if you can remember, at that sort of point in time, which seems to be pivotal.
Tons of angst, just like every single day, wondering what the right thing to do would be. It was not sustainable. The way that I was living and working wasn't sustainable. So I was working a very intense job at Google, super intense environment. I mean, just imagine that Google has now plucked the top 1% of the best universities in the country and around the world, and now they've thrown them all into one company, and now it's global, so there's 24/7 activity from all these people. So it was very rewarding, but also very, very stressful. And on top of that, I had a blog and a book that I was working on. When I say nights and weekends, I really mean weekends, because at night I was too exhausted to do anything other than my job. So really weekends, and I didn't give myself a break. And I was very fulfilled doing my side hustle, life after college at the time, but it wasn't earning any money. I just couldn't do both much longer. And so when my book was coming out, that's when I felt like if I want to give this book a chance at all, if I really want to see what it can do and know that I gave it everything I had, now's the time. And that it wouldn't be fair to try and go all in on my book and make it as successful as I could while working at Google. It wouldn't be fair to Google. I would be distracted, and I wouldn't be able to give my team at Google 100%, which is what they deserved.
Do you feel that you have been able to? It sounds like, I mean, for one thing, it sounds like you've really been sort of admirably successful in building what you've built. How about the intense environment idea? Because I know that even when someone leaves an intense environment, that they might then recreate that very intensity that they were trying to flee.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big trick of all this, and of so much personal development, that yes, whatever the environment is stressful, but it was my own personal boundaries or my own work ethic that made it unsustainable. So of course, quitting to then run my own business and become my own boss, in some ways I've cut myself a lot of slack. I leave at 3 p.m. every day to go walk with a friend or go to a yoga class. I mean, that's ideal, and it happens most days. I wind up very slowly in the morning, and I'm not worried about being at my desk at a certain time. I read, I meditate, I journal, I have a really nice morning routine. So on that side, it's good. And then, of course, for entrepreneurs, it's the tyrannical boss. Like, you're never off. Even when I go on vacation, I'm the one still running the business. It's not the kind of job where I can check it at the door because it has hit a certain time on the clock. And a lot of people working for others as well have that same experience. I mean, even when I was at Google, I was answering emails all day Sunday just because it was the only way to keep up and get, well, in my mind at the time, I at least had the belief that was what I had to do. And so now in my own business, just like you said, Andy, I've had to learn how to continually draw boundaries for myself and get better at things like delegating and asking for help and not doing it all myself and not being a perfectionist, and everything that would have plagued me when I was at Google, of course, has followed me. I think there's the two biggest areas for personal growth, I believe, or at least has been my experience in life, and as far as reaching, which is, I know, the subject of your work, are entrepreneurship and intimate relationships. Like, there's just nothing that will challenge you more and call up like all of your challenges or blind spots, because in entrepreneurship, money is the barometer. It's usually money is going to tell you, hey, where are you holding yourself back? Where are you closed? Where are you fearful? And then in an intimate relationship, it's the other person who, when you run up against friction or have tough times, it's like you really got to look inward and say, okay, what does this say about me? So both of them serve as such a mirror, and I value them tremendously because nothing has helped me reach and grow more than those two things.
Wait till you have kids.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, kids. Yeah, don't have those yet. But that I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Exactly. Yeah,
So,
but I think I wrote Pivot. I wrote it for what I call high net growth individuals. That we've heard the term high net worth. Well, money isn't everything, and so for us, whether it's entrepreneurship or relationships or parenting, that at the end of the day, what makes it worth it is that tremendous growth. And that for anyone listening to watching a show like yours or reading your work or mine, by nature we're seeking this out. People are taking their free time to watch something like this, and that says a lot about someone's values.
yeah, no, it's well said. Let me, on the topic of young people, not quite kids, but a little bit older than kids, but I know you've had a lot of experience working with younger people. I wanted to ask you one other question about young leaders. So, I work with a lot of young people, mostly college students and post-college students who all want to go off and be successful in the world. But the problem is that a lot of the leadership advice they get is a little bit kind of bigger than their britches. It's about how to become a CEO or how to become that general manager or rule the world, and they're not quite there yet. But we do want to be able to prepare young people for the potential for leadership if they so desire. So, in your experience, you've had a lot of experience. Especially around these topics, what if anything, would you tell or do for young people to sort of kickstart their journey into developing leadership skills?
Three things. One, don't wait for permission to start something. Don't wait. So much of the leadership conversation tends to be exactly as you said. Well, when I'm CEO, when I get promoted, once I've achieved this, then I will do that. And we delay it and postpone it. And I love how even I think Seth Godin, who knows who said it originally, but it's like the best time to start was yesterday. So whatever it is that you want to do or the way you want to become a leader or grow as a leader, start now, and don't wait for someone to hand you that authority. Because especially being young and on the younger side, people laughed at me when I went to coach training. I was 24 years old, and I was so drawn to it because I'd been a bookworm my whole life, and here's a whole profession around talking to people about what matters most to them and human potential. It was what I had already been reading. When I got there, I remember people laughing, like, what are you doing here? You're 24 years old. What do you know about life coaching? But the funny thing was, by the end of the training, I was the first one getting clients because I had already set up the Life After College website. I was tech savvy, and clients were coming to me and knocking on my door. So by the end of the training, my colleagues, the ones who had kind of scoffed at me, were wondering, well, how do I set up a website? How do I get my business going? And so I had an advantage, actually. And I wasn't trying to coach CEOs when I was 24. I was coaching college grads. And so it doesn't mean that you need to stretch so far that you're uncomfortable or not, it's not appropriate or you're not qualified. But do not wait. And I now take it as a good sign when people laugh at me and something I'm interested in, or I'm the black sheep, or I'm going the other way. I take that as a sign I must be doing something right. And even with Life After College, when I started that website in 2005, and it was a leap just like we talked about earlier, it was more of a mindset leap to write my first blog post in 2007, because I thought, am I qualified? Who am I to get on a soapbox and say anything? Why on earth would people listen to me? So I just started with what I was good at, and that was researching, curating information, and creating templates. So I have templates for everything from budgeting to breakup processing, and that's what I do. Is I can make spreadsheets for things that are like complex life questions, and I just gave it away for free. So thing number one, don't wait for someone to hand you permission. Thing number two, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to apps now that support taking initiative and starting something from scratch. There are so many ways that a young leader can use the resources for very little cost to get something going. So familiarize yourself and know that it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of age. It doesn't take a lot of authority. Like, you can start now. And again, if you start with what you're good at, but the tools that we have make it so possible. And I think that is one of the things that I feel lucky every day to be an entrepreneur in this day and age, because of how many tools and online services we have that are available to us. And the third thing that I would say for young leaders is, don't worry if you have doubt or fear or anxiety or insecurity or uncertainty. But the mistake I made for most of my 20s, I'm now 33 at the time of this interview, it was kind of getting in my own way, let's just call it. Like, when I was fearful or insecure or afraid, I thought something was wrong with me, or I should somehow try and make those feelings go away, or I needed to fix them. And now I've just come to a much more accepting place that, of course, if you're a high net growth individual, of course you're going to feel afraid and insecure and anxious and unsure. That's fine. Join the club. Just keep going. So that's now my approach to those things. And I think when you're younger, it's easier to feel like, oh, I'm the only one that feels this way, or there's something wrong with me and I better go fix it. And I never believed in those. I wrote a blog post once called "Self-Love Formulas Are BS," but I spelled it out, which was that I don't agree with, well, you have to love yourself before someone else can love you, or before you can become a leader. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't know that anybody who loves themselves all the time, all day long. And if they do, please go find them and interview them. But the key is, do you trust yourself? Are you resourceful? So for me, self-trust has been a more reliable barometer than self-love. And by leaning on that one first, the self-love, sort of inner confidence has grown. But when I aimed directly at that, it felt like too much pressure. I'd say, actually, I'm going to add a bonus round, which is small experiments. And this is something I talk a lot about in Pivot. Don't stretch so far that you're panicked. Find something tiny that you can do now with right where you are, whether it's creating a book club among your friends, or I have a free Pivot Mastermind kit on the website. You can create accountability with, I call them friend tours, people exactly your age. Like, you don't need to wait for some mentor to bless you with their wisdom until you can start creating support for yourself and accountability, or experimenting with side projects, or doing things that you enjoy, or trying to monetize something. So small experiments will help inform how you proceed as a young leader, rather than any big revelatory aha moment or insight, or even huge career leap. They're going to happen in the small moments. And if, to use your language, Andy, if you reach a little bit every day in your experiments, some will start to gain momentum, and then you'll double down on those.
And as you said earlier, for your own career, you might surprise yourself. It sounded like for you kind of were like, oh my gosh, I actually can make friends. Oh my gosh, I can actually do this, right?
Yes.
I guess a fifth one would be to somehow bottle the incredible enthusiasm and passion that you have. There's another product you can sell. But this is great. These are really helpful tips. And hey, I appreciate your taking the time. I know you have a very busy schedule, and thank you so much for chatting. These are really, really useful ideas. I know the listeners will find them very valuable.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for having me, and big thanks to everybody for watching.